Welcome to the BRICS News. Today, we'll analyze how India-China border talks resolved and RIC alliance emerges as new global power and BRICS rises as a multinational superpower. In a historic turn of events, India and China have reached a landmark resolution to their long-standing border disputes, paving the way for a stronger partnership between two of the world's largest economies. This video explores the implications of the India-China border talks, the formation of the powerful RIC, Russia-India-China alliance, and how this new coalition is reshaping global geopolitics. India-China border talks, a historic resolution. For decades, India and China have been embroiled in tense border disputes, particularly along the line of actual control, or LAC. The 1962 Sino-Indian War and subsequent skirmishes, including the violent Galwan Valley clash in 2020, marked the peak of hostilities between these two Asian giants. However, recent diplomatic dialogues have led to a remarkable de-escalation of tensions. High-level talks between Indian and Chinese leadership have reportedly reached a solution, heralding the dawn of a new era of cooperation and understanding. The resolution of the border issue is not just a bilateral victory, but a geopolitical game-changer. Both nations are now poised to turn their focus towards greater economic and strategic collaboration, something that was previously hindered by territorial tensions. The agreement signals a shift in the geopolitical chessboard where India and China, rather than being adversaries, are now positioned to become powerful allies with vast implications for the global power structure. Key details of the resolution. De-escalation at key flashpoints. Troops from both nations are expected to withdraw from high-tension areas with an understanding to avoid further confrontations. Diplomatic channels for future issues. Both countries have agreed to establish a robust diplomatic mechanism to resolve any future issues that might arise along the LAC, ensuring that tensions do not escalate to military conflict. Economic cooperation. The resolution opens doors for economic collaboration, particularly in areas like infrastructure, technology, and trade, which could see India and China forming a mutually beneficial partnership. The rise of the RIC alliance, Russia, India, and China. With the border issue between India and China nearing resolution, the groundwork for a stronger Russia-India-China, or RIC, alliance is being laid. This tri-nation grouping, originally envisioned as an informal platform for cooperation, is now set to evolve into a major geopolitical force. The RIC bloc represents over a third of the world's population and an enormous share of global GDP, natural resources, and military power. The RIC's primary appeal is that it offers an alternative to the Western-dominated global order. The United States and its allies in Europe, through NATO and other mechanisms, have long exerted influence over global governance. However, the rise of the RIC threatens to upend this dominance, offering a multipolar world where the West no longer holds unilateral sway. Why the RIC alliance is a game-changer economic powerhouse. Combined, Russia, India, and China represent an economic bloc that rivals that of the United States and the European Union. Their cooperation in trade, energy, and technology could create a self-sustaining system that diminishes reliance on Western markets and institutions. Military strength, Russia's military might, combined with China's rapidly growing defense capabilities and India's technological prowess, forms a formidable coalition. The RIC, in coordination with BRICS, has the potential to challenge NATO's dominance, offering a credible counterbalance to Western military alliances. Strategic independence. The RIC alliance promotes a foreign policy free from Western coercion. Each nation, through the RIC framework, can pursue its interests without falling prey to the sanctions, military interventions, or economic pressure often employed by the United States and its allies. The burgeoning RIC alliance is an existential threat to the West because it represents the solidification of a multipolar world. No longer will the United States and its European allies be able to dictate terms to the global south or strong-arm nations into compliance. Instead, the RIC represents the emergence of a new world order that prioritizes sovereignty, mutual respect, and collective security. India's shift from the West. Analyzing the diplomatic fallout. India's recent moves on the global stage highlight its increasing disillusionment with the West. The country's decision to expel Canadian diplomats amid a deepening diplomatic row marks a significant escalation in India's distancing from Western powers. What is particularly telling is that while tensions with Western nations are on the rise, India has simultaneously embraced a closer partnership with China, a country that was once viewed with suspicion and hostility. The diplomatic spat between India and Canada, which has resulted in the expulsion of diplomats, is just one example of the widening chasm between India and the West. Canada, with its alignment with the United States and the European Union, has long been part of the Western political sphere. But India's bold stance signals that it is no longer willing to be subservient to Western interests. Key reasons behind India's shift. Western hypocrisy. The West's historical exploitation of India, particularly during the colonial era, has never been fully reconciled. The United States and its European allies have often championed democracy and human rights while engaging in acts of imperialism, military intervention, and economic exploitation across the global South. Economic coercion. Western financial institutions, including the International Monetary Fund, or IMF, and the World Bank, have long been tools of economic coercion, often imposing harsh austerity measures on developing nations like India. The rise of BRICS offers India an alternative, where it can engage in financial transactions independent of the United States dollar and Western banking systems. Strategic autonomy. India, under Prime Minister Narendra Modi, has pursued a policy of strategic autonomy, which seeks to protect India's sovereignty and independence in foreign policy. The West, particularly the United States, has consistently pressured India to join its anti-China and anti-Russia agendas, something that India, as a proud and sovereign nation, resists. The West's fear of the growing strength of BRICS is palpable. What began as a loose grouping of Brazil, Russia, India, China, and South Africa has now expanded to include additional nations, forming BRICS Plus. The addition of countries from Latin America, Africa, and the Middle East into the BRICS fold means that the global South is rising, with BRICS serving as its platform for challenging Western dominance. By 2024, BRICS will comprise at least 10 nations, with countries like Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and others expected to join. This expansion cements BRICS as the most important bloc representing the interests of the global South. No longer can the US or European nations impose their will on the rest of the world without facing pushback from this powerful coalition. Together, BRICS Plus nations control a significant portion of global resources, including oil, gas, minerals, and agricultural production. This resource wealth gives BRICS the ability to set global terms on trade and energy outside of the Western-dominated frameworks. One of the most significant initiatives of BRICS is the move to de-dollarize global trade. By trading in local currencies and establishing their own financial institutions, BRICS nations aim to free themselves from the stranglehold of Western financial systems. BRICS represents a broad political consensus among the global South. These nations are united in their opposition to Western interference, imperialism, and double standards. They advocate for a world order that respects sovereignty and rejects the coercive policies of sanctions and regime change. The West's response to the rise of BRICS and the RIC alliance has been one of panic and hostility. However, their attempts to isolate and weaken BRICS nations have largely backfired. The sanctions on Russia, for example, have only served to strengthen the country's ties with China, India, and other BRICS members. The West, particularly NATO, is now seen as a relic of a bygone era, desperately clinging to power in a world that is increasingly moving beyond its control. For centuries, Western powers have plundered the resources of Africa, Asia, and Latin America, leaving these regions impoverished and underdeveloped. Today, the nations of the Global South are rising, thanks to BRICS and its vision of a fairer, more equitable global system. The US and its NATO allies have engaged in countless military interventions, from Iraq to Libya to Afghanistan, often with disastrous consequences. These interventions have not only destabilized entire regions, but have also tarnished the West's reputation as a promoter of democracy and peace. Western leaders, particularly those in the US and Europe, have consistently underestimated the rise of the Global South. By ignoring the growing importance of countries like India, China, and Brazil, they have alienated potential allies and accelerated their own decline. The formation of a strong RIC alliance, Russia, India, China, within the broader BRICS framework signals not just economic and political cooperation, but a unified strategic front against the dominance of the West, particularly the United States, NATO, and the European Union. Alongside BRICS, the Shanghai Cooperation Organization, which includes Russia, China, India, and several Central Asian nations, strengthens the collective bargaining power of non-Western nations on a global scale. The West's dominance, which for decades has been maintained through military interventions, economic sanctions, and political coercion, is facing an existential threat from the increasing cohesion of these blocs. Together, BRICS, BRICS Plus, REC, and SCO represent a realignment of global power, one that challenges the monopolization of international institutions like the UN, IMF, and World Bank, which have traditionally been used as instruments of Western power. The Shanghai Cooperation Organization is crucial to this anti-Western alliance as it focuses on regional security, economic development, and cooperation in fields like technology, counterterrorism, and energy. Originally founded in 2001 to address border security and promote regional stability in Central Asia, the SCO now serves as a diplomatic and security alternative to Western-dominated organizations such as NATO and the OSCE. The SCO offers a security umbrella for its member states, which makes it harder for NATO to assert influence in Asia. It also ensures that these nations work together on counterterrorism and military cooperation, providing a united front against any Western attempts to destabilize the region. Many SCO nations, including Russia, China, and the Central Asian states, are resource-rich, particularly in oil and gas. By strengthening energy cooperation, these countries can reduce their dependency on Western markets and create a parallel system that can challenge the petrodollar, further weakening US global influence. China's Belt and Road Initiative, a massive infrastructure and trade project, aligns closely with SCO objectives. By creating trade routes and infrastructure across Asia, Europe, and Africa, BRI not only boosts economic ties between SCO members, but also challenges the West's dominance in global trade. The expansion of BRICS into BRICS Plus is one of the most critical developments in recent years, symbolizing the broader unification of the Global South against the West. As nations in Latin America, the Caribbean, Africa, the Middle East, and the Asia-Pacific increasingly align themselves with BRICS, the Western world is facing the very real prospect of losing its grip on global economic and political systems. Why BRICS Plus matters? BRICS Plus represents a platform for nations that have historically been marginalized or exploited by the West to unite under a common banner. The expansion of BRICS in 2024 will bring countries like Argentina, Iran, Saudi Arabia, Egypt, and possibly more into the fold. This creates a diverse coalition that collectively controls vast resources, including oil, gas, minerals, and agricultural products. Key benefits of BRICS Plus for the Global South alternative financial systems. BRICS Plus aims to create a financial system independent of the West, including alternatives to the SWIFT payment system and IMF loan structures. This will allow member nations to trade in their own currencies, bypassing the US dollar and avoiding the punitive effects of Western sanctions. Fair trade agreements. BRICS Plus promotes trade deals that are more equitable for developing nations, ensuring that the global south benefits from its own resources rather than being exploited by Western corporations. Political unity against Western interference. For decades, the US and its allies have interfered in the political processes of developing nations, often through regime change or economic coercion. BRICS Plus provides a united platform to resist such interference, offering diplomatic and economic support to nations that face Western aggression. The West's fear, the collapse of US and NATO hegemony. The growing influence of BRICS, the RIC alliance, and the SCO has sent shockwaves through Western capitals. For decades, the United States and its NATO allies have relied on their control over global institutions, financial markets, and military power to maintain dominance. However, the rise of these non-Western alliances marks the beginning of the end for this unipolar world order. Western decline in key areas. Economic vulnerability. The US dollar's role as the world's reserve currency has allowed the US to impose its will economically on the rest of the world. However, with BRICS pushing for de-dollarization and an alternative global financial architecture, the dominance of the dollar is under threat. Countries trading in local currencies, such as the Chinese yuan or Russian ruble, pose a direct challenge to US financial supremacy. Sanctions losing effectiveness. The West has often used economic sanctions as a tool to punish nations that refuse to comply with its geopolitical objectives. However, as BRICS and RIC strengthen, nations like Russia and Iran have found alternative markets and support from their BRICS counterparts, rendering Western sanctions increasingly ineffective. NATO's waning influence. NATO has been the primary military tool of Western hegemony, used to justify interventions in the Middle East, Eastern Europe, and elsewhere. However, the rise of the SCO, combined with China and Russia's growing military power, means that NATO's ability to project force is now limited. Any direct confrontation with the RIC or BRICS nations would be far more costly than it would have been just a decade ago. The Western world, particularly the United States and Europe, now faces the uncomfortable reality that their days of unchecked global dominance are numbered. The very institutions they created to maintain their power, NATO, the IMF, and the World Bank, are losing relevance as new powers rise. Why the RIC alliance is a direct threat to the West. The Russia-India-China alliance is not just an economic and political bloc. It is a strategic powerhouse that directly threatens the West's long-standing influence over global affairs. For centuries, Western powers have maintained control through economic coercion, military force, and political manipulation. The RIC alliance, backed by BRICS and the SCO, offers a robust alternative that undermines these mechanisms. Strategic factors that make the RIC alliance fearsome resource control. Russia's vast energy resources, China's technological dominance, and India's growing industrial capacity give the RIC alliance control over significant sectors of the global economy. Together, these nations can leverage their resources to influence global markets and reshape trade networks outside of Western control. Military power. While the US and NATO have relied on their military superiority to maintain dominance, the RIC alliance, particularly with Russia and China's military capabilities, poses a serious challenge. Any confrontation with the RIC bloc would stretch Western military resources thin, particularly if it leads to a broader conflict in regions like the Indo-Pacific or Eastern Europe. Diplomatic autonomy. The RIC alliance allows its members to pursue independent foreign policies without being subject to Western pressure. This is particularly important for nations like India, which have often been courted by the West to join its geopolitical agendas but have resisted in favor of a more autonomous and multipolar approach. The new global order, a multipolar world emerges. As the RIC alliance, BRICS, BRICS Plus, and the SCO continue to grow in strength, the vision of a multipolar world is becoming a reality. In this new global order, power is distributed more evenly among nations, and no single country or bloc can dominate the global stage. Key characteristics of the new multipolar world. Regional powers rising. Nations that were once considered peripheral are now emerging as regional powers with the ability to influence global affairs. This includes countries in Latin America, Africa, and Southeast Asia, which are increasingly aligning themselves with BRICS and the SCO. Decline of Western institutions. The Western-dominated institutions of the 20th century, such as the UN, IMF, and World Bank, are losing legitimacy as new alternatives emerge. The New Development Bank, NDB, founded by BRICS, and the Asian Infrastructure Investment Bank, AIIB, are examples of financial institutions that offer an alternative to the Western financial system. End of Western hegemony. The days of the West unilaterally dictating the terms of global governance are over. The rise of BRICS, RIC, and the SCO represents the end of the unipolar world and the beginning of a new era where multiple powers have a seat at the table. Conclusion: the Western decline and the rise of the BRICS-RIC power bloc. The resolution of the India-China border dispute has paved the way for the formation of a powerful new geopolitical alliance that could reshape the global order. The growing strength of BRICS, the expansion of BRICS Plus, and the solidification of the RIC alliance are direct challenges to the West's dominance. With India increasingly distancing itself from the US, Canada, and Europe, the West is rapidly losing its influence over global affairs. The fear in the West is justified. The rise of BRICS and the RIC alliance signifies the end of Western hegemony and the emergence of a multipolar world where power is shared among a broader group of nations. The Global South, long exploited and marginalized by the West, is now rising, with BRICS and its associated alliances leading the charge. For the US, NATO, and the European Union, this marks the beginning of the end of their dominance on the global stage. The carefully constructed systems of economic, political, and military control that the West has relied upon are now eroding as BRICS, RIC, and the SCO usher in a new era of global governance. In this shifting landscape, the Western powers, once seen as invincible, are becoming increasingly isolated and weakened. The BRICS nations, united with the broader Global South through BRICS Plus, are building stronger economic, diplomatic, and military ties, offering alternatives to the Western order that once seemed unassailable. The fear in Washington, Brussels, and other Western capitals is not just about the loss of influence, but about the realization that the very mechanisms of control they designed are now being challenged and replaced. With the rise of these powerful alliances, the unipolar world order has come to an end. A multipolar world has emerged, where the West is no longer the sole arbiter of global destiny, and nations like India, China, and Russia, alongside their partners in the Global South, are asserting their rightful place in shaping the future.